Hello, greetings to the community. I would like to share my experience with you. At first, I thought about asking for it to be anonymous, but the truth is that the few people I care about who will recognize it have already discussed it with me. I am a real estate agent. Some time ago, when I switched companies, I was lucky enough to be assigned one of the most important properties we had for sale. Good luck or bad luck, you be the judge. We had many very large, luxurious ones, but others were simpler, although also intended for the wealthiest clients. Among these, there was a very well-equipped cabin that previously belonged to a famous singer. In fact, it even has a small recording studio. It was a small cabin, but extremely luxurious, and the path around it had been built very carefully. Despite everything, it seemed to be in the middle of nowhere. You had to look for it very specifically to be able to get there. At times, the road seemed to end, and navigation apps wouldn't take you there. It was surrounded only by mountains, and the nearest town was a few hours away by car. A real beauty, that's for sure. It had been in the company's portfolio since before I arrived. For several years, the owner had been undecided and asked that it not be shown, although he finally made the final decision to sell it right when I arrived. It was going to be hard to sell. The price wasn't affordable and it was hard to get to. It was for a very specific type of person. Someone who had enough resources and was so extremely protective of their privacy that they would want to be there. The first time I saw it, I had to go with another colleague from the firm. There was no way I could have found it on my own. Since that time, the feeling had been overwhelming. Being there, in the middle of nowhere, just the two of us. There's an almost desolate feeling which I suppose can be stimulating for artists. It scared both me and my companion. He told me he was grateful that now it was my turn to make that sale. It was a big commission, but he didn't find it amusing to travel all the way there. Above all, because, he emphasized, he didn't plan on coming back alone. We checked what needed to be renewed and left the place. My partner insisted we do it before nightfall. There are parts where the road seems to disappear at night. It's terrible. Let's finish as soon as possible, he told me. I listed everything needed and contacted a contractor who said the work could be done in 2 days. I didn't want to travel there 2 days in a row, so I decided to stay in that house. To get ahead on other work, on other files, and to supervise that all the repairs were done in the best way possible. Staying there alone was the worst decision I could have made. That night I went through possibly the most traumatic experience of my life. I traveled there in a caravan, with the 2 workers' trucks and the contractor. Although I warned them, they were still surprised by how remote it was. They worked very quickly in a hurry, but I took it as a good thing. It seemed like they wanted to finish everything in a single day, but they didn't have enough time. I warned them about what my coworker told me, that the road was tricky at dusk. So a little before 7, they started their way back. I took out the things I had prepared to make myself dinner. At a certain point, I even started to enjoy that solitude, that complete tranquility. I imagined myself living in a place like that, at least for a while, writing or doing something similar. Maybe that's why it caught the attention of that singer who had it built. I sat at the table on the large wooden porch. That's when I noticed there were no insects. I also noticed there were no sounds of crickets, no animal sounds at all. I started to think back. I hadn't seen any animals, not even a squirrel, the whole way since leaving the main road and taking that hour and a half on the dirt road to get there. At that moment, I thought I saw something. At first, I assumed it was pareidolia, the phenomenon that makes you see faces where none exist. And the thing is, I thought I saw a face. A woman's face, completely white, among the branches of some trees, as if there was a figure standing there, and only her face was peeking out. I stood up, took a few steps toward what I thought I was seeing, and it didn't move. It was my imagination, I was sure, so I just went back and started working in the studio. And even though I repeat, at that moment I was sure it was just my imagination, I locked all the locks. In the studio, there was an even more overwhelming silence. I feel like I could even hear my heartbeat. I wrote on my computer for a while before noticing the light flicker. I realized that I hadn't checked the fuel in the generator, and it had been used a lot during that workday. I opened the door. When I opened it, I thought I heard distant laughter. At first, I thought the workers had returned, but that was unlikely. By then, they should have reached the village. The same sound. It caught my attention again. This time it was clearer. It was coming from outside. I approached the porch again. It could have been a bird, maybe, making that sound that I could have mistaken for laughter, but there was no other noise. And it was a strange hour for a bird that wasn't nocturnal to be around. I was about to go back to work when that same laughter caught my attention behind me again. I turned around and realized it was coming from the same direction where I thought I had seen that face a few hours earlier. I checked my phone only to remember that there wasn't even the slightest hint of signal in that place. A few kilometers away, about 20 minutes from there was occasional signal. I remember because that's where my partner and I stopped, so he could send a message on our first visit. For a moment, I didn't know what to do. Should I leave? Where would I go? Maybe to town? To my house? Was I really going to drive 4 hours just to come right back and make it in the morning? I went into the cabin. I started to feel really anxious. My chest hurt. I had no idea what was out there. And even though all my logic told me it was just an animal, I couldn't control my nerves. Without thinking any further, I grabbed the keys and ran to my car. I started driving down that road, cutting through vegetation that seemed thicker than it did in the daylight. I drove and drove until the sound of notifications coming to my phone made me realize there was finally a bit of signal. Minimal, but it was something. I opened my messaging app and chatted with some of my coworkers. The workers confirmed they had arrived safely and would see me in the morning. I talked a bit with my boss and my girlfriend. I calmed down. I was finally able to breathe. It was time to go back to the cabin. I realized my nerves, loneliness, and the silence had played a trick on me. That's exactly why no one else wanted to go sell that property despite the generous commission. It was difficult, but it was my chance to prove that I could do it. I turned the car around on that narrow road with difficulty. I had only gone a few hundred meters back when I realized I had made a mistake at some point. I didn't see the path ahead, only trees. I went down, stepped back, and tried to get my bearings. Without the car's lights, it would have been totally dark there. I barely found the road 50 meters back, an almost imperceptible curve. In fact, there were many entrances that looked like new roads and led nowhere. At least at night, they looked like entrances. I thought that from above the area must look like a labyrinth. I thought it would look spectacular if I asked the people who would be filming the cabin video a few days later to also take some drone shots of the area. I was in a better mood, calmer, but when I got to the cabin, I realized the door was open and the lights were off. I hadn't left either of those things like that. I went in to check and saw that everything was normal, or at least it seemed that way. I checked carefully, but no one was there. Then I found the generator was out of gas. There was a possibility that I just hadn't closed it properly and the wind had opened the door. The lights had simply gone out because the generator had run out of gas. I began telling myself the anxiety and everything I wanted to see it was just my tendency to always have the most pessimistic ideas, the most outlandish thoughts. But nothing was happening. I was in a cabin in the woods, far from everything, but that was it. That was all I kept telling myself. I was in the back looking for the gas tank for the generator when I heard something else. I heard someone's footsteps walking inside the cabin. I shut my eyes and focused. I even pinched myself, like the ladies say. I pinched myself to make sure I wasn't asleep. That I wasn't imagining it, it was really happening. Was it real? Someone was walking in there. I crouched down and slowly walked toward the side. I didn't want anyone inside to see me through the windows. In the distance out front, I could see my car just as I had left it. With the door open, I crouched down to get closer, but I heard footsteps inside also heading toward the door. I heard them reach the door. I heard them come out, walk across the porch. Because of my position, I couldn't see whoever was there, but we were less than 10 feet apart. Footsteps descended from the porch onto the gravel. Unsure if they'd head toward my side, I dropped and rolled under the cabin floor. The space under the floor was enough for me to hide. I couldn't see, but I could hear the footsteps going around it, circling all along the gravel path. After a while, I stopped hearing them. I focused on making as little noise as possible. I was very tired. I must have stayed there for half an hour until I was sure there was no one nearby, and I decided to come out. I went over to lock my car. Everything was in order. I went into the house and made sure the doors and windows were locked as well. Yes, everything seemed to be calm. I tried to stay awake. That was going to be the plan, to sleep until the workers arrived the next day. They were going to arrive very early. Everything was going to be fine, I kept telling myself. Everything was going to be fine. However, around 3 or 3:30, I was already dying of sleep. My eyes were closing. I thought maybe I could sleep. I would lock myself in the study. Nothing would happen. I hadn't heard or seen anything strange for hours. I looked for some water, a blanket, and a pillow. I let go of the glass of water. The car alarm had gone off. I ran to the window by reflex to look out, illuminated by the flashing lights from the car's rooms. I could see a figure running toward the trees. It was a woman wearing something like a tunic, but it was very strange because the legs were very odd. You could tell the knees bent backwards like a dog's. I let the alarm ring until it stopped on its own, then I lay down next to the door. I couldn't stop thinking about what I saw. I kept thinking. I kept shaking. At sunrise, a distant sound was heard. An engine. It was the sound of a car, an old car that made a lot of noise. And I could hear it from far away because those mountains carried the echo for miles. One of the guys who had worked the day before arrived, accompanied by some local people from the neighboring town who they had found to help with the work that day and finish it in a single day. One of them noticed my dark circles and told me that as long as I stayed there alone, I would keep losing sleep. At that moment, I couldn't ask him more because he started working, but at lunchtime, I approached him. The three people who were coming from the village were somewhat surprised that I had stayed alone. I don't know why, but I told them what I saw without hesitation. I wasn't embarrassed. At any other time in my life, for some stupid reason, I would have been embarrassed to talk about what happened to me. But at that moment, I wasn't. The three of them looked at me with complete seriousness. One of them was even nodding as if he understood me. When I described to them what I saw near the car, they confirmed that I had come face to face with a local legend. But that wasn't the only thing I'd encountered. While we were talking, I realized something. Whatever this was, it must have gotten close to the car to set off the alarm. Like all company cars, this car had front and rear cameras with motion detection recording. I couldn't wait to get back to the city that same afternoon and check the recording. To be able to see that thing, hopefully, whatever it was, to see it up close, to find out if it was something real, something like what the workers at the place described to me. I was dying to see it. I was dying to see that legendary being. It's very strange to come face to face with things you can't explain, with an apparition, with a phenomenon that suddenly shows you there's a world of unexplainable things out there. When I had to spend that terrible night in a cabin, that night when I thought I saw things, beings that aren't natural, when I experienced the greatest fear I've ever felt in my life, for me, it marked a before and after. We finished working around 5 in the afternoon and started the journey back to the city. The workers from the nearby village seemed a bit nervous to be there. They were like that all day. I'm not sure what happened over time, but later everyone seemed to feel the same way. Even among those who came from the city, who in theory didn't know any of the stories surrounding that area, those mountains. We stopped in the village returning. I invited everyone to eat because no one had done it until then. The local boys ate with us before going home. I was very lucky to get their contacts because a few hours later when I got to the office, I received a text message from the contractor telling me that if they were needed again, they would no longer go to the cabin. The excuse was it was far, but the pay was good. They had a contract with us, which they were risking by refusing. They had already traveled to places even farther away multiple times. Everything was very strange. I took the car's camera to check if something had happened, but they told me it wasn't working. That was obviously a lie because we checked it constantly. So I asked the tech support guy to take a good look at it, that I urgently needed the footage from the night before, and he promised me he would recover it. I got so focused on other properties in the following days that I briefly forgot about my terrible experience there. Until my boss told me that there was someone interested, that I would have to show them the place, and he wanted me to take Andres, his son, so he could start gaining experience. Andres was a great guy, very intelligent, even at just 19. Although most people there didn't like him, thinking he was only working there because he was the owner's son. I had a deep conversation with him since we started the same day. The truth is, I think he had really inherited his father's talents. I was grateful I didn't have to return alone. It would have been crazy, ridiculous, if I told my boss that I was scared of a cabin. It never crossed my mind to tell him. Maybe that's why it was so easy for him to say he already had 2 more clients scheduled after the first, and to tell me that we should stay that night in the cabin so we wouldn't have to make the trip back. I prepared well for this occasion. I brought extra gasoline in case the generator failed or we ran out. I carried my father's hunting knife and, without shame, my mother's small cross blessed in the Vatican. I took it from the house without telling her. It was her most precious relic, so I doubted she would lend it to me without me having to explain why I needed it. Andres picked me up in his dad's truck, an all-terrain one built to handle anything. That reassured me because it wasn't from the company. It didn't have a camera. It was a really beautiful day. It looked like it was going to be when we set out on the road. But as soon as we left the city, as soon as we arrived at the village, we noticed the black sky that signaled a storm. From there, I called my boss, told him it was likely we'd get heavy rain, asked if he was sure the potential clients would still come despite that, and he said yes. I told him I thought there was some risk, and he said that's why he lent us his truck so there'd be no excuses. So there wasn't an answer I could give him. I had no excuse. And it was time to move on. I tried, without sounding alarmist, to explain to Andres how strange that place was, that area. I might not have done it, but I felt obligated to let the village guys know I'd be up at the cabin again. If anything happens, go to the area where there's signal and we'll come, they told me. That made me feel much calmer. Andres was a bit skeptical, making fun of me, but I didn't want to say anything to him. I preferred to believe nothing would happen, even if it made me look crazy. I preferred that over him realizing how creepy that place could be. From then on, I drove since I knew the route and it would get tough. As soon as we got onto the dirt road, the first drops of rain started to fall. As if it were fate, as if everything was planned, since we were moving slowly and the rain was still very light. Andres rolled down his window and so did I. It felt nice. The truck was built to get wet and take a beating. But suddenly I started to feel something I don't remember ever feeling. With every meter we moved forward, I felt it would be one more meter that would be harder to come back from, a meter I could never return to. I felt like we were heading toward danger, toward death, as if by our own will we were driving straight into the wolf's mouth, to the gates of hell. That's funny, said Andres. What? I asked him. It's just that suddenly I feel as if there were people among the trees, as if faces were coming out from between the branches. I looked to the sides and I noticed it too. It was, it wasn't like there were real people there, but more like there was something in the forest. Like there were naked figures standing among the trees, but ethereal, ghostly. I stopped and we saw it was only an optical illusion. I couldn't explain to them the feeling of relief I had at that moment, that they weren't really there, standing watching us. When we got to the point where there is cell signal, I stopped and got out of the truck. I tied a ribbon to a tree, a golden ribbon. I told Andres that in case of an emergency, it was the only spot for miles where he could ask for help to communicate with the outside world. "Okay, later I'll run over here to talk to my girlfriend," he told me, pointing to his backpack where he actually had running clothes. We continued on the road. We finally arrived at the cabin, got out of the truck, and I stayed behind to unload my things. Andres went ahead with the keys. However, just a few meters from reaching the porch, he stopped and stood still, looking inside. I grabbed my backpack and walked over. I stopped next to him. I couldn't go on either. "Do you feel it too?" he asked me. "Yes," I replied. "Is there someone inside?" It was strange, indescribable, but we could both feel it. We went in and still had that feeling. Even though we checked every inch of the cabin, we felt like someone was there. Just as it started to rain harder, the client's truck arrived. However, it wasn't him who was interested, but two people who worked for him. A man of about 40 with the look of an accountant from an old movie, and a young woman of about 25, short and thin, with a much more imposing presence than her companion. From their interaction, we saw she was in charge of the decision. "Sorry our boss couldn't come. They trust our judgment a lot. He asked us to check a few things. If everything meets the requirements, he'll come himself with an offer." We have no reason not to believe them. The party owned a regional self-service store chain. They took a very quick look inside the cabin, and without asking us a single question, they left. His boss seemed to care more about the surroundings. The man went into the woods, and the girl asked, for some reason, that we show her where the septic tank was located. It was very strange. We assumed these were all normal details that would interest them. We waited for them on the porch. The rain intensified, but they didn't mind. I noticed that Andres was looking toward the trees, toward that spot where I thought I saw the woman that first time. The same optical illusion could be seen again. "Doesn't it almost look like a woman is standing there?" I said to him. "There is a woman standing there," he replied very seriously. He grabbed my shoulder to stop me from leaving, as if demanding my attention. I noticed how that face appeared by chance among the branches. Suddenly it moved, turned to the side, and disappeared into the trees. Before we could say anything, we heard the man coming back from among the trees, from the opposite side to where we were looking. He shouted to his companion that everything was ready, that he had found it. We didn't understand what he was referring to. The girl approached him and asked if everything was in order. He replied that yes, everything was there. Whatever it was. She turned to me and said her boss would get in touch with my boss. "With me," I replied. "They have to negotiate with me." She smiled and walked to her truck without a word. The man approached us and asked if someone was waiting for us, if we wanted to drive together to the town. "We're staying tomorrow. We have to show the cabin again. We're staying," I told him, and he smiled, looking confused. "You don't need to stay. We're going to make an offer. Don't stay here," he said, genuinely concerned. At least that's how it seemed. "Thank you. You can make an offer, but we're waiting for one from a client who already visited first, and also for the response from the people coming tomorrow. Try to contact Carlos as soon as possible so he can give you priority. He's in charge of this sale. Take care on your way back, Andre suddenly said, very confidently. No one had gone to see the cabin before, and we weren't sure what would happen the next day, but it was a very good move as a salesman. It restored our power to decide. Do you really think they're going to scare us so we'll leave and not show it tomorrow? He said to me as soon as the man walked away. Look, they have a woman spying from afar. Do they really think we're gullible enough to believe in ghosts? Andres took his waterproof phone and told me he wouldn't be long, that he was going to walk to the area with signal to talk to his girlfriend. I told him it was really far on foot, but he replied that he liked the rain, the mountain, that he'd be fine. I saw him walk away down the path, but I caught up with him. I had to catch up with him. I handed him the hunting knife and asked him to take it. I went to the truck and took the blessed cross from a different backpack. Somehow I felt that it protected me more than that knife. It was getting dark. I heard a strange sound coming from behind the cabin from among the trees, like it was an animal, but a huge animal, like a bull or something like that. And then I managed to see how the branches moved, as if something was walking among them. But I don't know how to explain it. It was like something huge, something meters tall, was moving among them. I brought the truck closer to the entrance. I wanted the truck to be near the cabin in case of any emergency of any kind. When I got out of it, I saw a figure among the trees, but it was different from the one I had seen before. I acted like I didn't see it and everything was fine. The rain had already stopped. I entered the house acting like nothing happened. Inside, I peeked out and paid close attention to what I could see outside. I was peeking through a crack and I saw 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. At least 5 figures among the trees, walking as if they were surrounding the house. They kept moving. I don't know if they were naked. They seemed to be. At that distance in the darkness, I couldn't really tell. Some were small, others were taller, as if they were men and women. I then noticed one of them breaking away from the circle they seemed to be making. It came closer, almost revealing itself, but it was still behind some branches. Anyway, I could see that it was a man with a beard. At that moment, I don't know what happened, but the motion sensor light outside turned on and I could see him more clearly. He had a crown of thorns. He was bleeding from his forehead. It was obvious that this man was dressed like Jesus. As soon as the light hit his face, he took 2 steps back. And then I heard a car approaching in the distance, and I got worried. That man disappeared as soon as that beat-up pickup truck arrived. I recognized the figure driving it, and also the passenger. They were the 2 workers from the village. Andres got out from the back, completely pale, as if he had seen a ghost. I went out to greet him, but Andres ran past me, ignoring me. He ran into the cabin. They parked the pickup next to where I left the truck, almost by the stairs above the plants. They even backed it in, ready to drive out of there at full speed. I wanted to ask them what was going on, but they told me to talk inside to get in quickly without wasting time. We did. They started checking all the windows. Does the generator have enough gas to last us all night? One of them asked me. Yes, why? What's going on? They motioned for me to be quiet with a finger. They turned off all the lights inside, leaving only one on, the one outside by the entrance, the one facing the road. They waited for Andres to come out of the bathroom. Then we all went into the study. They turned off the lamp on the desk and we were completely in the dark. We left the study door open so we could listen to what was happening outside. Someone or something knocked out there. Something knocked out there. Andres looked like he was out of it. I left the studio despite the workers signaling me not to. I left and locked the door from the outside. I felt like I was helping them, that I was protecting them. Somehow I felt like I was keeping them safe. I crawled across the cabin floor until I got into a position where I could see the door. The outside light appeared to be out. They knocked again. I moved around the cabin trying to figure out how many people were out there, what was out there. I couldn't hear anything. No one was trying to open the door, nothing like that. It was as if something had knocked on the door and then disappeared from there. I crawled across the living room to reach a window where I thought I could see the entrance. I felt very scared. I felt like I was frozen, like I was numb, as if my body was asleep, and it was hard for me to respond. When I was halfway across the living room, when I was most exposed in the middle of the couches, I looked up at the window. I could see something. Unfortunately, I could see clearly despite the darkness. There was a woman at the window, a window that didn't close completely. And through that small crack, through that gap that was left, something was trying to stick its head in, staring at me, smiling like a mad woman, with her eyes almost bulging out. The only way I could describe it is that she looked like a hungry beast in front of its prey. And I screamed. They say I screamed really loud, but I don't remember. I don't remember anything. All I know is that somehow I ended up with broken nails with splintered hands, and I don't know how I dragged myself back to the studio. What I remember starts about half an hour later. I couldn't speak. They tell me I wouldn't stop screaming. Andres was in a terrible state. I noticed that one of the workers left the studio and then came back and said we could leave now. I left still feeling very bad, still trembling, looking for the keys, telling them we had to go, but they even laughed. No, man, we're not going to get very far. The roads disappear at this hour, but we can stay here now, brothers. I think they're leaving. I didn't know what they were referring to. We approached the window. Through the trees, I could make out figures that were walking away, but very, very slowly, taking a step every few seconds. There, among them, I thought I saw the one I had seen at the window. And the thing is, that woman was wearing a cloak like the one the Virgin of Guadalupe wears, but in black and gold. And I saw it. I clearly saw how she was wearing it. And then I connected it with the other guy who was dressed like Jesus. I didn't understand what kind of weird, crazy people were in that place. Where had they come from? What did they want from us? I had one more question, something I suddenly realized. Why on earth were they, the workers there, if they were so afraid of those roads, those mountains, when night fell? Why had they come for us? Why are you here? I asked. Then I had to trust their intentions. There was no reason for them to be lying to me. It helped that they knew we would be there. Letting them know was a good decision. Then they kept an eye on the cars that took that road. When you leave their town toward the mountain, there's very little else. 2 or 3 settlements, groups of small houses, and the people from the town know well the people who live up there. That's why certain cars going up caught their attention. And it's very obvious when people aren't from the area and they hadn't seen that kind of vehicle go up in that direction for years. At first, I thought about the buyers who went to see the cabin, but they assured me that it wasn't them who caught their attention, but rather 3 SUVs that went up afterward, all the same, with tinted windows. That had put them on alert. I'm telling you, it had been at least a year since they'd seen that kind of activity. They also noticed the clients, the ones who went to see the cabin for the buyer. When they went up, they only noticed the vehicle, but when they came back, they arrived at their little workshop with the SUV scratched and covered in dust, and with branches on the front. It looked like they had been driving through branches, through the bushes, like they hadn't taken the road. It was extremely hot, with steam rising from the engine, as if it were old or damaged. But it was a very recent model, and when they saw it go up, it was in perfect condition. The man who got out of it collapsed onto the ground, and the girl who was driving asked them to please check the damage and tell her if she could make it to the city. The damage was only superficial. They couldn't figure out why it was so hot, and they asked them what had happened. The young woman asked them to just fix the truck enough so they could continue on their way, and she walked away to make a phone call. The man who was with her started to catch his breath and said that an animal had crossed their path and caused them to go off the road, fall into a shallow ravine. But luckily, the truck had managed to keep going with the 4-wheel drive because that animal had followed them for miles. Oh, wow. Well, there are very few deer left around here. I don't know what kind of animal could have made you go off the road and then move through the brush and follow you, one of the workers at the shop replied. Are you sure it was an animal? Well, what else could it be? The man said, as he seemed to get agitated again, as if just remembering it terrified him. We were just coming along normally and it jumped on us. It was walking on 2 legs, but it wasn't a person. It wasn't a woman. Well, it looked like one, but its face, its snout. He didn't need to be more descriptive. They already knew about that legend. They knew the stories about what people said, especially about what happened to those who weren't from there. Those who ventured into the forest for a walk, what they said they saw, what they claimed roamed around at night. All the local people knew the stories, but it was very rare for someone to have actually experienced them. There were few people who claimed to have seen her, to have seen that woman, if you could even call her that. Those who had bad luck running into her were outsiders. And a lot of people didn't understand why then. There were so many luxury vehicles heading to that area, despite what was being said. Could it be that they didn't believe in the legends, or was it exactly the opposite? I don't know why they decided that. Why target us? Maybe they liked me, or knew working with me meant more work. But the moment they were told that, when the couple told them what had taken them off the road, they finished checking the truck and then closed the shop. And then they went up to the cabin. They told me that far from the area where there's signal, closer to the highway, someone suddenly crossed their path. They were driving slowly, alert, because it was starting to get dark. and something jumped in front of the pickup. It was Andres asking for help, very scared. He kept saying over and over that something was after him, that they should help him turn around and head back to the town. But they told him they couldn't leave me alone back there, and they convinced him to go back to the cabin. Among the trees, among the undergrowth, as they moved forward, they saw several figures approaching in the same direction, but they weren't ghostly figures, not at all. They were people coming toward the cabin where I was waiting for them. People Andres saw who didn't faze him. No, he was scared. He had seen something very different. And they arrived at the cabin just in time, and now they would spend the rest of the night with us. No one left that forest at that hour, and now we were there, waiting. After a while, the figures that had tried to enter the cabin, or at least had come close enough to knock, had already moved away. Who were those strange people? What the hell were they doing there? Not even they could explain it. Suddenly, I think we heard something in the distance, and Andres ran to hide under the bed. I'm not lying, he ran to hide like he was a child. And the others followed him, and they pulled me along too, scared, and everyone's expression had completely changed. Their apparent calm was gone. It's her, 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 they repeated. And even though everything was locked, even though we had secured the window, all of us, like little kids, we all hid under the bed. Whatever was out there chilled our blood. I feel like I could tell you it was literal, because that's how it felt. Andres under the bed stopped responding. He had fainted, completely lost consciousness, and in a way I envied him. I hadn't seen anything, and I couldn't stand it, neither could the other two. It was anything but natural. It was like an instinct, something telling us that we were in the presence of something horrible. It was that kind of crying, something that made it clear to us that it wasn't a beast. There is no beast in the world that cries or sounds like that. No, there was something human or, well, conscious in that thing. And suddenly, out of nowhere, we could breathe, and outside there was a calming silence. I stood by one of the workers as we approached the door. Somehow, the fact that we no longer felt that terror from just moments before told us that it was no longer nearby. It's like you can feel inside yourself and in your chest when it was there, but now it's gone. We went outside and it seemed like there was very little air out there. You couldn't hear anything, and honestly, it was even hard for us to breathe. We managed to get Andres to respond, and we all gathered near the door, ready to run to the vehicles if something happened, if anything else happened. But Andres seemed so fragile, I worried he couldn't handle another scare. I was really worried about him. Suddenly I touched my bag. I didn't have my rosary anymore. I didn't have it with me. I started looking for it. I searched all over the cabin, under the bed, in the truck. It wasn't there. Where the hell could it have gone? As I retraced my steps that night, my head cleared up. And then I realized that we still had to show the cabin the next day. that I couldn't go back to work with my boss with just a ghost story like the one that had happened to us. I would have to convince Andres not to say anything too. We'd look ridiculous and no one would believe us, even if 4 adults told the story. Even if there were more witnesses, no, I couldn't get out of there. Andres fell asleep, feverish and sweating, while I tried to persuade the workers to stay until morning. They pretended to repair something and waited while we showed the cabin. I couldn't leave without doing it, didn't want to stay alone, and they'd take Andres with them. I convinced them by saying I'd pay as if they had fixed something. Even though that night was terrifying, it doesn't compare to the feeling of desolation I had when I was alone there. There was something horrible about that night, about that first night, that I can't describe. There are 2 things I want you to understand, 2 things I haven't shared yet, or that I don't want to be shared with the general public. The names of the workers, because they still have their little workshop in the village, and as you'll see next, it could be dangerous for them if it's revealed which one it is. And second, the name that people in the village give to what lives in the woods. They told me the name only once that night and said never to repeat it, especially outside. As dawn was breaking, while I thought everything was over, at least for that night, I saw one more thing. Something that instead of fear made me feel disgusted. I don't know if that's exactly what I felt, but I think it's the closest way to describe it. Just as the other presence had made me feel terror just by being near, suddenly, later on, I felt a lot of disgust, revulsion. I looked out the window. From behind a tree, from behind a trunk, I could see a head peeking out. Bald, very pale. The features, the eyes, the nose, and the mouth looked more like just black smudges. It was something very strange that seemed more like a vision from being tired and sleepy than something real. I couldn't swear to you that it happened, but I thought I saw him peeking out and then running up the mountain as well. He looked naked and skinny. I told the workers that I thought I saw something. They told me it would always be like that, as long as it wasn't morning yet. There was always something heading up there, up toward the mountain. They'll always be going over there, to the door, to the cave. They say that's why people come from far away, because of the door. Everything comes out and goes there. They say that's why the tax is around here, because they let it out from there, and there's no way to put it back in. When I asked what he meant, he just answered that he was talking about a door to hell. It was pretty strange, to say the least, to describe it somehow, learning about this belief. I'm not saying that I think it's true. I swear on my children's lives I don't even know what to believe. If I were in your place listening to this story, I wouldn't believe it either. That's why it's so hard to share. That's why I think nobody shares their experiences when something happens to them. Something that surpasses paranormal events, such as hearing voices or seeing a deceased relative at home. People are comfortable believing that, but not something more. Even though the world is full of evil things, even though it shows us every day and every night, we prefer not to see, we prefer to believe that these things don't happen and that they're just crazy stories. Everything changed for me when I learned what was believed and said. Everything changed when I learned I was sleeping just a few kilometers from a gate to hell. The horror experienced is difficult to describe. and yet nothing was happening to me. The last minutes of darkness that night were peaceful. Dawn broke and the sunrise was beautiful, but it didn't calm me at all. Everything I was afraid of was close. We had coffee and cookies for breakfast, the only things we had available, which we would offer to the customers. Before 9 o'clock, the two workers started cleaning around the septic tank in the back, pretending they were doing some kind of repair. And right on time at exactly 9 o'clock, we saw two new model black trucks arrive. The windows were extremely tinted. You couldn't see anything inside. And being a bit cautious because we know there are some very special people, I approached alone just a few meters to welcome them. Andres was still in bad shape, but he tried to stay composed in the cabin. A short man with a military-style haircut got out of one of the trucks. He looked tough, matching his gaze and greeting. He walked to the truck behind, where someone slightly rolled down the window. He signaled, and two men exited the first truck. It was very clear to me now, they looked more like bodyguards, like soldiers, than assistants like the ones from the day before. They said they'd inspect the place. I wanted to give them some information about the purchase options, but they said all of that was already taken care of. They say they filmed Ease here, right? The first one who got out told me, smiling, referring to a hit by the singer who owned that place. But I told him honestly, I didn't know that. His smile faded and they went to the back. Another, who looked identical, exited the truck that had stayed and walked toward the woods. I realized then they wanted the same thing as the others. But that only made me have more doubts about this place, about what it was, about what could be there. While I was watching, the nosy bodyguard came up to me again, the only one who seemed friendly, or relatively friendly. Hey, but is it really from Tay? Well, I shouldn't say this, but yeah, it's his, I told him, because I needed that little bit of complicity with at least one of them. What do you think? Do you think your boss would be interested? A lot of people have already come and shown interest, I told him. He ignored me and walked into the cabin, where he saw Andres still pale in the living room. And you? Are you okay? He asked, still a bit shaken. Do you need anything? Andres said everything was fine. The guy kept walking to the studio. He closed the door behind him, but I could still see him through the glass window. He made no effort to hide his actions. He started kicking the floor as if he were looking for something in it. Then he opened the door. And he just told me, crazy people, right? If you only knew that happens here. The devil himself has walked these halls. Or a devil, right? Because now it turns out there are many. He kept smiling and left. I didn't dare ask him anything. When I went out, I realized that two of the bodyguards were checking the workers' credentials. I told them everything was fine, that they were trustworthy. All right then, they said as they handed them back. Obviously, they already had the information they were looking for. Everyone went back to the trucks except for the inquisitive one, who stayed with me in front of the cabin. I thought he was going to make small talk, maybe ask me a question, but he didn't. He just looked at me with a mocking smile. I think he knew I had thousands of questions to ask him, but I wouldn't dare. Someone whistled among the trees, the guy from the other truck, the one who had come out later. The inquisitive one approached him and gave him something. He walked toward me while I was already with Andres and the two workers. Did any of you lose this? He said, holding in his hand a rosary covered in dirt, my mom's rosary. It looked like it had been buried for a long time. It looked old, worn out, even as if it had been bitten. I told him it was mine. He gave it to me, smiling. Be very careful where you leave these things around here. He got too close to me and said something with these exact words, which, even though in a friendly tone, sounded almost like a threat to me. Don't teach him anymore, and you all need to leave here. I don't want these guys coming back to fix anything. As soon as there's cell phone signal, my boss will take care of everything for the purchase. Yes, he used Haga. I don't want to change a single word of what he said. They got in the trucks, and as they turned so theirs could go, he rolled down the passenger window and asked me to come closer. I'm not saying this to you in a bad way. Let them go. Your sale is done. Keep your commission. Just leave things as they are. It doesn't matter. The boss doesn't care. If I'm telling them to leave here, it's for their own good. I've spent nights here, and... Yes, I interrupted him. I've spent nights here too. I spent a night alone. I could tell his eyes widened, even behind his dark glasses. So you know what I mean. Grab your things and get going. I'll go slowly so you can catch up. I don't know why, but I believed he was sincere, so I told the others to get everything ready and we got out of there as fast as we could. We were grateful, especially Andres and I, that we never had to return since it was being sold. We drove as fast as possible. Honestly, it often felt like it was already gone. We caught up and followed them closely on the dirt road. As soon as we got to the highway, they sped up like they were heading to an emergency. We lost them immediately. I called my boss and he said there were already 2 offers on the table. He said the first offer was from the previous day's people, but we had to accept this final one. I didn't even want to ask him why. I bought some time on the call so I could talk to Andres and try to calm things down before we left for the city. I told my boss we'd look around the area and arrive at night. There are a lot of beautiful things, a lot of scenery, so I guess he believed it. We arrived at one of the workers' houses. There we had the chance for Andres to rest for a while to get some sleep. We thought that surely he would feel better when he woke up. The 2 workers went to their workshop and left us in the care of Don Teo, the father of one of them, an older man, but one of those ranch guys who still looked strong. He was kind and set up a cot for Andres to rest. A few houses down, I saw a table on the sidewalk. A lady was selling homemade food, and without thinking, I went over and ordered something. The lady sat with me when she brought me the food. She seemed very interested in me. Are you here to see her too, young man? I came to ask her for something. Don't do it. The last ones who came suddenly never came back down, and they were the kind who came all the time, always went up and stayed there all night, but suddenly they never came back. And we knew they were important people because the army and helicopters and everything came to look for them, but they were never found again. As the lady spoke, it began to rain, so she moved me under a small roof in her yard. With the rain, the few people who were around went into their houses, disappeared from the street. I finished my meal and was saying goodbye. I didn't want to know anything else, I just wanted to sleep. I was dead tired. But Don Teo's shouts, who was looking for me, alerted me. The boy is gone, the boy is gone, he said. I ran outside and saw our truck was gone. Andres had taken off in it, but why had he left me there? How was I supposed to get back? What was I going to say to his dad? Besides, he was too upset to drive. I quickly asked Mr. Teo how I could get to the city to try to catch up with him. No, he told me. He didn't go to the city, he went back up toward the cabin. No, 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 I thought. He couldn't do that to me. I didn't want to go back up, not anymore. I asked Danteo if he had said anything, and he just told me that he woke up touching his chest, that he was asking for his little medal, Then I thought I remembered it, a virgin medal he always wore, given by his grandmother, my boss's mother. May she rest in peace. I couldn't believe he returned for it. It was even harder than finding a needle in a haystack. I asked Danteo about his son, and he told me he wouldn't be back soon, but if I wanted, he could take me up there. He saw I was scared, which is why he offered, and I was desperate enough to accept. We got into a Pinto, a little car that barely seemed to run, and very slowly we set off on the road. Also, the windshield wipers didn't work, so we drove very slowly. We reached the end of the road, went a bit further on the dirt path, and suddenly he told me that this was as far as he would go. He said the little car wouldn't go any farther and would get stuck. I agreed. He had already done too much to help me, so I got out and started running. And after about 20 minutes, I realized with great relief that I was already close to the place where there is signal. It wasn't even 5, but it felt like night would engulf the place any moment. I ran as fast as I could through the muddy, puddle-filled place. And about 200 meters before reaching the cabin, I found our truck. And it was locked. I thought at least that meant Andres had left it like that. The thunder indicated that the storm was only going to get worse. And in the cabin on the porch, I saw something. There was that woman. That awful woman with her virgin shawl. Sitting at the table on the porch. I stayed behind a tree, peeking out, and then I realized that I was right at that tree from where things would peek out to look at the house. And I looked all around because I felt like at any moment they were going to pass by there again. All right, the cabin wasn't an option. I wasn't going to get close, but I had to go back to Andres. I had already told Danteo to go back, that I was going to return with Andres. There was nowhere else to run. I had to find him. I assumed everyone heading to see the place was taking that faint path up the mountain. But also that everything I had seen, real or not, whether it was because of my fear or my imagination, but everyone was going that way. I couldn't go back without Andres. I couldn't leave him, so I headed into that side of the forest. Soon the path became very difficult. The trail disappeared, but an opening in the vegetation seemed to show where to continue. I followed my instinct. I did it. I looked to the sides again. And this may have just been my imagination, but in the distance I thought I saw people walking in the same direction as me. Figures among the trees. What wasn't my imagination was the fear I suddenly began to feel. That indescribable terror. No, she was nearby. And I started to run as best I could with no idea where I was going, gripped by horror. I reached the edge of a ravine. Looking down, I could still see, with a bit of light, a canyon, and at the bottom of it, something that looked like a cave right in front of it. I'll try to describe as best as I can what I saw. There were people, figures, silhouettes. 3 of them were holding hands, forming a circle, and then 6 also holding hands, forming a circle around the first 3, and then others and another circle. I couldn't count how many people there were, but there were 6 circles of people, one inside the other. Then I saw a figure climbing up toward me through the steep ravine, almost crawling. It was Andres. "Let's go, he told me quietly but firmly, and we started to run. I've got my little medal now. Suddenly, I don't know how to explain it, but we felt like we were very close to it. To the Kiabikas. We almost froze from fear, from how it paralyzed us, but we kept running down the path, almost by inertia. About 50 meters ahead, luckily, thanks to the light of a lightning bolt, we managed to see something walking right toward us, right along that path. That woman, dressed like a virgin, was walking slowly toward us. And I emphasize, I don't know what to believe. I no longer know what I saw, but what I thought I saw, even though Andres didn't. Was that woman looked almost like a skeleton, as if she barely had any skin? Or it was rotten, or I don't know, like she was a walking corpse. I still try to convince myself it was just an illusion, just lightning, that no one came, nothing happened. We changed our route so we wouldn't run into her, so we wouldn't run into whatever it was that had come up. And some lights made me feel like we were coming back to life. At first, we thought they were the lights of a patrol car. However, as we got closer, we realized it was a rescue ambulance. We ran up to them asking for help. Danteo knew that the police would never go up there for any reason, as if it were forbidden, but that an ambulance would make it. He saved our lives. The paramedics checked us, took care of us, and one of them took the keys to our truck and drove it behind the ambulance back to the highway. We were shaking so much that we couldn't go on. I was telling the guy driving the ambulance where we were going that we had seen people, that there were people back there, something like a cult. "No, brother, nobody comes up here anymore. It's been years. They closed off all the roads. The last ones who went up never came back down," he told us. When we got to the highway, they still waited with us for a moment, making sure we were able to drive. We kept saying that we had seen people. We swore that we had seen something really strange. The other guy, the one who had taken our truck, a young doctor doing his internship, told us, "Look, I'm going to tell you the truth. We don't believe in that stuff, but I can tell you what the people around here have told us. They say they're dead, that very strange people used to come here, and suddenly they didn't come back. That their souls went through that cave, through the door as they call it, but their bodies stayed around here." While he was talking, Andres shook his head. "I know what I saw," he said. "Guys, I was just meters away from one of those lunatics. I'm just telling you what we've been told, that's all. I don't believe in any of that," he replied. "But there is something strange, and something happens every time a rescue team or relatives go up to search. They've never found anyone, and it was a large group. They say the bodies move every night so that no one will ever find them." That night, it was around midnight when I dropped Andres off at his house and took a taxi to mine. Everything in the city seemed strange to me, as if none of that could scare me anymore. I was grateful to see everything, even the guys who looked like thugs that were way too close to me while I waited for the taxi on the avenue. Even that was welcome. There was one more trip to that cabin during the day. And I also found out a little more, and I got access to that photo. Just to see it because it's still on the work computer, only on the computer of the guy in charge of information technology. I'm going to try to take a picture of it, and I'm going to share a little more information with you, but that will be in a little while. So I don't get into trouble when I finally quit to start my own business in the same field. Whenever you want to come here in Jalisco, mi casa is your casa. Expect more news from me. Thank you for now for your attention to this story. I hope to clear up any remaining doubts soon. Soon? Soon.